Testing 1, 2. Derek, can you hear me? Testing 1, 2. Derek, can you hear me?
I can hear you if that helps.
Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, November 5th, 2020. Estimates in room 255 will begin at approximately 3 p.m. with Mickelfeld in the chair. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Are we starting?
I'm good to go whenever.
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? We will resume estimates for the Department of Families, and the Minister has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will just finish off with my opening comments. First of all, just a check. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, thank you.
The Minister of Families.
Thank you very much. Into Child and Family Services area, our top priority as a government is protecting the safety of our children. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have provided Child and Family Services employees with over 670,000 individual PPE items and over 3.1 million from Manitoba Risk Recognition Program to show our support for everything they do to keep our children safe. Our government has put a moratorium on children aging out of care, ensuring that youth continue to receive needed supports during this challenging time. We have also collaborated with TELUS to provide tablets to school-age children in group homes, and with resource assistance for youth to provide housing to at-risk youth. But while our COVID-19 efforts have been significant, I am also very proud of everything we have done to reduce the number of children in CFS care and keep families together. Budget 2020 includes over $400 million for CFS agencies and authorities as part of our single envelope funding approach, which has proven to reduce the number of children in CFS care. And the previous NDP government doubled the number of children in care. We are turning the corner. In fact, there are now 865 fewer children in care than there were in 2017. That is the third year in a row that we have reduced the number of children in CFS care in our province. For years, leaders in our Indigenous community have called for the end of birth alerts. I'm proud to say that as of July 1st, our government ended the practice of birth alerts by investing in community-based preventative supports. In community living and disability services, our government's commitment to vulnerable people also extends to the thousands of Manitobans who are supported every day through our community living and disability services program. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have invested $1.9 million to provide over 2.3 million individual PPE items to those serving vulnerable adults and children with disabilities. We have also provided those same staff with over $4.9 million from the Manitoba Risk Recognition Pay Program in recognition of their extraordinary sacrifices for vulnerable Manitobans. We continue to work with Abilities Manitoba and other key stakeholders every day to ensure that our community services workers are properly supported during this challenging time. This year alone, our government is investing $461 million in the Community Living and Disability Services Program, $21 million more than last year's budget. Our government is committed to empowering Manitobans with disabilities to lead lives of dignity and independence in the community. We also continue to invest record levels in employment programs for Manitobans with disabilities. This year, we established an advisory group on employment opportunities for Manitobans with disabilities and a task force to review vulnerable persons living with a Mental Disability Act. Early on in the pandemic, we invested $4.6 million in the Disability Economic Support Program, providing 43,000 Manitobans with disabilities with a $200 one-time payment that they could use for their COVID-19 related expenses. And we continue to move forward on our plan to create a new dignified income support program for Manitobans with severe and prolonged disabilities, ensuring that our most vulnerable citizens can lead lives of independence and dignity. In the area of housing, our government believes that all Manitobans deserve access to a safe and affordable place to call home, which is why we are making record investments in housing. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have invested nearly $3.5 million in expanded shelter capacity, supporting additional shelter space at the Main Street Project, Siloam Mission, and the Salvation Army in Winnipeg, as well as Samaritan House in Brandon. Recognizing the need to turn the corner on $1 billion in deferred maintenance by the previous NDP government, this summer we announced $31 million for maintenance and repair of Manitoba housing properties, allowing us to make 800 otherwise vacant units available to new tenants. Since 2016, our government has invested over $108 million in new social and affordable housing rental units, creating 713 new units for Manitobans who need them. We have also nearly tripled the budget for Rent Assist, providing support to 3,500 more Manitobans than the previous NDP government ever did. We inherited a mess in Manitoba housing from the previous government, and we will continue to clean it up through strategic investments that will improve housing for Manitoba families. In closing, I'd like to thank all of the staff of the Department of Families for everything they have done to support vulnerable Manitobans during this challenging time. And most of all, I'd like to thank Manitobans for their quiet resolve, their patience, and their perseverance as we work to overcome this pandemic together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We thank the Minister for those comments. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement?
No, thank you for taking the time, Minister, to come and answer some questions.
We thank the member. Ask for any other questions now? Under Manitoba practice, debate on the Minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 9.1A contained in Resolution 9.1. Does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically or have a global discussion?
Global.
Thank you. It is agreed then that questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner, with all resolutions to be passed once questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The member for Thompson.
Could the Minister please inform the committee when the KPMG report will be publicized? And why was the report contract doubled?
Minister,
I want to thank
the Honourable Minister.
Right, have to wait for that. Okay, thank you very much. And I thank the member for the question regarding the KPMG report. I will advise the member that we are in the process of going through a very significant change to childcare in the province of Manitoba. I think it was very clear to us, especially during the pandemic, where we didn't have where some of the challenges were within the childcare sector itself, and some of the changes that need to take place. And in particular, we've realized that parents who need childcare, maybe they're working at different hours than when childcare facilities are open and things of that nature. There was definitely a need to change the system so that it works more for Manitoba families. So, of course, we did put out an RFP. KPMG has come up with a report. The report is simply just a tool that we're using. We are going to continue forward and speak with Manitoba families and parents out there to see what they need. So it's really just one part of the changes that will take place within the system. And so I don't want to overemphasize what that report is. It's simply just one tool, and certainly we have to go out and we will be speaking with the childcare sector more closely over the course of the next number of months, and also with Manitoba families, because I think what we all need to do in all of this is create a childcare system that is there for Manitoba families when they need it. And right now we need to make some changes to the system in order to achieve that goal.
The member for Thompson.
Could the Minister explain why the contract for KPMG doubled and who approved it?
The Honourable Minister.
So there's some significant work that needed to be done with respect to this, and it happens with other contracts as well. Sometimes the deadlines are not met, and there needs to be, you find out things in the middle where you need to maybe change the scope of the contract a little bit, and so that was what transpired with this as well. And so there's a process that takes place with respect to how that works, and we felt that there was a need to go to another phase with KPMG, and so we worked with them on that, and we moved forward on that.
The member for Thompson.
Could I get a copy of the contract?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, the reason for the extension of the contract is that it was COVID related. Obviously, there were some challenges during those times of meeting certain deadlines and so on. So we extended the contract, and it was specifically for COVID reasons.
The member for Thompson.
I'll ask again. Is it possible for me to get a copy of the contract?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, just to clarify there, it's, sorry, just a second. Yeah, the reason also for the extension was because of the need to, because of a number of changes that took place as a result of COVID, we needed to take in other considerations within the scope of the KPMG report as well. But again, I don't want to, that's just one part of, a tool that we'll use in terms of guiding us in some of the changes that will take place. I think, again, it's very important that this be driven by Manitoba families, and that we're providing a child care system for them, and we need to make sure it's there for them when they need it. I think in the past, certainly pre-COVID and during the previous administration, we didn't simply have a system, and we knew that it wasn't the ideal system. And so we need to work with all those stakeholders out there to ensure that we have a system that works best for all Manitoba families.
Just on a matter of procedure, Minister, if you need some time to get your answer, I won't necessarily recognize you right away. Just wave or something like that. I'll watch the screen, and that'll be the signal for me to recognize you. Hansard's requested we do it that way. So, further questions? The member for Thompson.
So the minister has indicated several times that there was a change in scope of the KPMG contract due to COVID. So I was wondering if I could get a copy of the contract before COVID and then a change in the contract after COVID, after it was deemed that they needed to have a change in contract.
Yes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member for the question, and I believe there was a FIPA request that came through. I was just getting my staff to look into that, and that has been fulfilled, that FIPA request. But again, I will say to the member that the reason for the change in the scope is because we're in the middle of a worldwide COVID pandemic. And, so when these things are put into place, we need to ensure that changes take place as a result of that. So this all happened in the middle of this. And so obviously we had to move in that direction to ensure that we're providing a system that is there for Manitobans when they need it. So obviously that scope had to change because of COVID.
The member for Thompson.
Who approved the extra funding and for KPMG, and how was that accounted for?
So again, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Honourable Minister, go ahead.
We'll get used to this new way of doing things, I'm sure.
By 4 o'clock.
Treasury Board authorized the Treasury Board secretary to provide authorization because we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So decisions around that were related to COVID-related decisions could be approved by that. I believe that was in the information that was sent out to the member already, but we're happy to answer that for her again.
The member for Thompson. Member for Thompson, I don't know if you are muted or if you're not speaking. It's a small screen and you're a small square. So if you did want to ask something, please go ahead and make sure you're not on mute.
Could the minister please provide some expanded details on the change in scope for KPMG?
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Go ahead, Minister.
Yeah, I think I already provided the member the answer to that question. And again, these were COVID-related changes that needed to take place. So that's the change in the scope.
The member for Thompson.
And when will the KPMG report be tabled?
Oh, sorry.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I've already answered that question as well. This is a tool that is being used to formulate a much broader change in the child care system itself. Again, we will be consulting with Manitoba families to ensure that we get a child care system that's there for parents as they need it. We know that people right now, or eventually people As people are getting back to work, we've set up a matchmaking system that matches Manitoba families who are in need of childcare with centers who are have openings and space available for them. So we know that system is working well right now, and so we're trying to move that into a more permanent way of dealing with those who need to get the childcare when they need it. So those are some of the examples of what we will be doing, and over the course of the next few months. We will be consulting again with Manitoba families, with stakeholders in the childcare sector, the Manitoba Childcare Association, and others, to formulate what I think will be significant changes to the childcare system that will be, to make it a system that is there for families when they need it.
The member for Thompson.
It is concerning because not only is the minister bringing forward legislation changes for childcare that she is refusing to publicly reveal, she is also doing so without releasing the KPMG report prior. So I asked the minister again, when will the report be released and when will the bill be made public?
Well,
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the member will know certainly the significant blockade that they put in place back in the spring session, preventing bills from going through at that time, and so because of their political wranglings, we were in a position that we had to introduce this when we did. We will be going out and significantly consulting with people in the sector who are working in the sector. We will be consulting with Manitoba families. Moving forward, there will be lots of consultation towards that end goal. But I will remind the member again that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And those political, wranglings and the blockade that took place in the spring, has forced us to have to look at different ways of doing things. And so we think that this is a great opportunity, for families in Manitoba to have even more input into what will be significant legislation moving forward.
The member for Thompson.
Thank you. I do find it interesting that you've introduced legislation and then saying you're going to consult, but we will move on. Could the minister please provide the current childcare wait list?
Well, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I will say to the member is that we don't actually, for the first time in the history of the province of Manitoba, certainly in the last decade or two, we do not have a wait list in the province of Manitoba. In fact, we have more than 6,000 vacant spaces for Manitoba families that, again, through that matchmaking system that we put in place during the pandemic, something we learned to do during the pandemic, it's been very positive for Manitoba families being able to have access. So now it's very transparent for Manitoba families as to where those vacancies are. And as they continue to get back to work, they'll have those opportunities to be able to reach out to those child care centers, to home-based centers, to others to be able to access the child care that they need when they need it.
The member for Thompson.
Thank you for that information, Minister. The $22 million the government announced, up to $4 million for workplaces offer on-site childcare services for their employees. And how much of that money has been spent?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for the question, and certainly these investments that we're making through the Manitoba Chambers, Manitoba Chamber of Commerce, the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Sustainability Trust, which is through the Winnipeg Foundation, along with our Child Care Development Tax Credit. These are all mechanisms we put in place to ensure that when Manitobans do get back to work after COVID, that we are creating that long-term sustainability of the childcare sector by ensuring that there's more spaces available for those families who need it. So already in that process, we have created more than 130 spaces this year. We know that in past years, under the previous government, there were sometimes maybe less than 50 new spaces created a year. So we did this in the middle of a pandemic. We did it with our partnerships with the chambers and the Child Care Development Tax Credit. So this particular one was done for the temporary childcare grant for home-based centers, which created 130 spaces. Through the rest of the money for the with the chambers, 8.5 million, we're looking to create over 800 new childcare spaces within the system. And also through the Child Care Development Tax Credit, we're looking at creating an extra 682 spaces there. So we recognize that there's more work to be done, but we're continuing to work with those partners out there. And the Sustainability Trust, which is managed by the Winnipeg Foundation, provides that long-term sustainability for those existing childcare centers now for things that they need within their centers, supplies and so on, upgrades to certain things that they need within those centers. So we take a long-term sustainability approach, and this, of course, is over and above the investments that we already made within the childcare sector. Again, providing risk recognition pay, 1.4 million for over 1,000 eligible childcare workers, over 60 million in provincial operating grants flowed to those centers, over 15 million through a one-year extension of the bilateral agreement with the federal government, 2.4 million in COVID-19 response grant to help childcare centers with COVID-related costs. And I've already talked about the chambers and the Sustainability Trust Fund, as well as the Child Care Development Tax Credit. So these are all tools that we put in place to ensure that the long-term sustainability of the child care sector in the province of Manitoba. And we know as Manitobans get back to work that we need to ensure that we've got a system that's there for Manitoba families when they need it.
The member for Thompson.
I'm going to be handing questioning over to the member for the Pas-Kamisak.
The member for the Pas-Kamisak.
Thank you. My first question to the Minister of Families is, could the Minister please explain the reasoning for including sections 231 to 232 regarding the Children's Special Allowance in BITSA and not its own bill, which could have allowed for public committees and debate at large? What is that one there? Christian.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank the member for the PAW for the question. I think it's an important one. Certainly, we have taken a different approach by moving to our child welfare system, by moving from a system that depended on individual the number of children in care to determine the amount of funding that goes into the system, and we felt that was backwards. That creates a system of that provides sort of a perverse incentivization of the apprehension of children, and so we got away from that. We heard loud and clear that we feel very strongly that. We want to, keep Manitoba families together and keep those children with their families. And so we took away that sort of perverse incentivization and we moved to a model of single envelope funding. And what that has provided to those the CFS agencies and the authorities is the funds needed where they can actually spend it more on prevention initiatives to ensure that we give the families the support that they need to keep their children with them. And so we made that change because we wanted to reduce the number of kids in care, and we're seeing some good positive results from that so far. The member opposite knows that in the last 3 years, we have reduced the number of children in care each of the last 3 years. We've made, significant improvements there. We know, of course, that there is still much more work to be done, but we think we're going in the right direction with this. What the member opposite is referring to was a historical practice that was of the previous NDP governments, and we've ended that. We're moving on from that, and we need to move on from that to ensure that we continue on the path of keeping families together. So that's our approach to this. That's why we're moving in this direction, and we think it's that's in the best interest of Manitoba families.
The member for the Pas-Kamisak. I just say to the honourable member that I believe you're on mute, and I would also ask, if I may, I hope that I'm pronouncing the name of your constituency correctly.
The Pas-Kamisak.
The Pas-Kamisak, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You do have the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, why in BITSA and not in its own legislation where it will require committees such as this and a debate on its own?
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I thank the member for the question, and certainly it does offer debate within the BITSA bill as well, and those questions could be asked under the minister who is responsible for that bill. But certainly, we're here, we're having that discussion now, and the reason for it. I mean, I think it's really important to note that children's special allowance now goes directly to those agencies for those children within those agencies. Before it came back through the provincial government, we've ended that practice. So the agencies are now keeping that funding from the federal government, plus we are giving, and so they're actually having access to $15 million more than they were under the previous regime. And so I think what's really important here is that this is about reducing the number of kids in care. It's about keeping families together. And so we'll continue to move in that direction. And I'm happy to have this debate here today, debate on the floor of the legislature in question period. I'm happy to have that debate. The member can ask, and members had the opportunity to ask in the BITSA bill debate as well. And so we'll continue to have that debate moving forward. Again, it was a practice under the previous NDP government, and we ended that practice. And this is a way that we can now, I think, move on so we can all work together towards, I think, what we want to do, all of us, is to ensure that we provide a system that's there for children when they need it, the safety for those children, but also to to keep those families together. And I think that's what we all want to achieve in the end.
The member for the Pas-Kamisak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question for the Minister of Families is, could the Minister explain how she thinks it's democratic to retroactively legislate this measure and to remove the ability for legal action?
Honourable Minister, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, this is, again, a practice under the previous NDP government that took place where they took that children's special allowance. We ended that practice. I will remind the member opposite that under the previous NDP government, they doubled the number of children in care. That is not the direction we're going in. We're making the necessary changes and moving on towards creating a system that's there for Manitoba families when they need it. And so, we're moving, and we've put a system together in place which has actually seen a reduction in the number of children in care in the last 3 years alone. We think we're moving in the right direction. We'll continue to move in the right direction. And I really, with all due respect, will not take lessons from the members opposite. I do believe that went in the wrong direction when they doubled the number of kids in care. We'll continue to work with those stakeholders in the community, with those workers, with those families, to ensure that we are providing a system that is keeping families together.
The member for the Pas-Kamisak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the province's role and what's upcoming for. It's in regards to Bill C-92 that was finally January of 2020, I believe. OCN is currently once again being a trailblazer with our First Nations in Manitoba. We're going to be the first, I believe, to have our own Cree laws based on family structure in regards to Bill C-92. And in fact, it's going to be ready in October of 2021. And the Cree word that we have is Wakutawin, which is basically just all about family structure. And I heard Harold Sonny Cochrane do an amazing and very informative presentation in regards to this bill and how it's going to look like. And there's 3 fundamentals. And the first one is connection, keeping the families together. The second fundamental is culture. Make sure it's culturally appropriate, if you will, where our children are placed, hopefully within our own communities. And a third one is leadership in regards to chief and council and a special committee of elders, if you will, in regards to decisions with our children. I'm really curious, what is your role going to be while this is all changing? I know the goal is to get rid of the provincial act in regards to CFS so we can implement our own Cree laws. But what is your role going to be, and how is it going to play out while this process is taking place? And how is it going to look for the rest of the First Nations that are going to be moving towards this?
Anytime you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Minister, you moved around on the screen there. You're now in the top corner instead of the middle on the other side. So anyway, Minister, please go ahead.
I can't control those things, I know. But you know what? I just want to thank the member for the member for her very impassioned, question. I know she's very passionate about these issues, and she's done so much for her community, and I thank her for what she's done. C92 has been a real challenge for us. One of the challenges is that we don't know, even though the federal government has proclaimed this legislation. We have sent several requests to the federal minister, the previous minister, 2 requests to the existing minister, and we have not received a response from them. We outlined some concerns for Manitobans, and obviously the number one concern is the safety of the children going through these transition periods. We need to ensure that. There's a number of factors that, again, we've gone through this issue of devolution in the province of Manitoba, where I think we learned some pretty important lessons back in that day that I think we can offer for the federal government, but they won't pick up the phone, they won't respond to the letters, and so it's very difficult for us to work around that. But what I will say is that until those changes do take place, we will continue on the path that we are. We have a focus on ensuring that children remain with their families or remain in their communities with their loved ones. We will continue to focus on the safety of those children, which is paramount in all of this. And so I thank the member for the question, and that's where we're at with this issue, unfortunately.
Order, please. For the information of all members, our Rule 2.1 provides in part that where all required actions for the business of supply and the Committee of Supply have not been completed 60 minutes prior to the usual adjournment hour on the last Thursday, sitting prior to the Remembrance Day week, the provisions outlined in Rule 2.24 are to apply, to subsection 24, that is. Therefore, the hour being 4 p.m., I am interrupting proceedings to put the question without debate or amendment on all remaining resolutions before this section of the Committee of Supply. I will therefore call in sequence the resolutions of the following departments: Families, Justice, Infrastructure. At this time, I invite virtual members to unmute themselves so they can respond to the question on the resolutions. Please unmute yourselves.
You guys can.
Okay, there's a lot here, and I've been asked to read slowly so that we get it all right. So I will try and keep a reasonable pace. Starting with Resolution 9.1. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $8,285,000 for families, administration and finance for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.2. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,273,277,000 for families, community service delivery for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.3. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $10,313,000 for families, corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.4. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $686,435,000 for families, child and youth services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.5. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $128,798,000 for families, housing, for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.6. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $56,000 for families' capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.7. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $14,927,000 for families, loans and guarantees programs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 9.8. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $77,731,000 for families, other reporting entities' capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.1. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $49,119,000 for justice, corporate and strategic services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.2. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $65,807,000 for justice, crown law for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.3. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $4,340,000 for Justice Legislative Council for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.4. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $475,346,000 for justice, community safety for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.5. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $62,914,000 for justice, courts for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 4.6. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $3,090,000 for justice capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.1. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $10,271,000 for infrastructure, corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.2. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $30,999,000 for infrastructure, highways, transportation, and water management programs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.3. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $147,783,000 for infrastructure works for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.4. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $16,732,000 for infrastructure, emergency management, and public safety for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 15.5. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $516,159,000 for infrastructure capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This concludes our consideration of the estimates in this section of the Committee of Supply meeting in room 255. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Committee rise.